Okay, so we're here in the garden in Thompsonville and we're talking about how to plant a fall garden. Right now I'm at one of the community beds that's doing really well this year. She's grown a whole variety of different plants. Right here she's got zinnias and marigolds for beneficials. It's keeping her cucumber plants very healthy. You can see it's climbing up the double trellis. It's supported, and the cucumbers are doing really well growing. They're easy to harvest and they're far away from the soil to avoid any soil-borne diseases. But today we're talking about planting a fall garden. So this gardener has decided to remove some of her spring planted vegetables like spinach and radishes and lettuce that is now gone to a bolting stage, or the end cycle of the living plant. And she wants to plant for a fall garden. So she has cleaned her garden space of the garden debris. She's cut the stems at the soil level. She's also brought in some nice mulch, some grass clippings, to add fertility to her soil as well as help hold moisture. So she's put in the clippings. We're going to pull it back and you can see that the soil is nice and moist and ready to go. So a couple things to get ready before you plant is, number one, do your research. What kind of foods do you want to eat in the fall? Any of the spring planted greens are fine: arugula, spinach, lettuces, radishes, peas, and kale would be fine to plant now. I've talked earlier about when to plant the seeds, so follow that schedule as well as a schedule that we have posted in the Thompsonville Community Garden Shed. So today what I'm going to do is show you an example of how to plant in an existing bed for a seedling as well as for seeds. So first we're going to start with the seedling. So as you can see, I'm very close to a lot of plants. If I were to just dig with a big shovel, I would disrupt the soil and the nearby roots and would further harm them and stress them out. So I want to go in a small area away from where the roots are from those plants, dig my hole just appropriate for the size of the plant in the pot, the same depth. You can see that the soil here is really moist, and that's very important when you're planting new seedlings or seeds. It's very important to have moist soil. The reason for that is you want to make sure that your new plant going in the ground has moisture, because the surrounding plants nearby are mature and their roots are everywhere and they're going to go for that water first. So you want to make sure that there's enough moisture in the soil for all the plants. So here's my rosemary. It's been in a pot. I got it a while ago. Here's an example of the roots encircling. It was getting tired of being in the pot. It continued to grow and it grows in a circle. So if I were to put this in the ground, it would be stunted. It wouldn't grow right away. So what I do to help it grow right away is I gently remove the bottom encircled roots, put those in my compost pile, and now I have gently torn and exposed the roots. They're ready now to spread out into the soil. I'm going to put it into the hole and just gently bring the soil back around so that the plant is at the same level in the garden as it was growing in the pot. So I haven't disrupted the soil around these other plants. I haven't disrupted the roots. So I'm planting it in there, tapping it down to make sure that there's no holes. For any problems, you want to make sure that it's pressed down. I do my circle for a trough for watering. And when I water at the soil level, not from above. I make sure that the water is going right to where the roots will be able to absorb it. Okay, so that's how to put a seedling in. So now we want to put in some seeds. So we're brushing the mulch to the side. Again, the soil is really nice and fertile from having that mulch on there for a few weeks. I'm going to take my trowel and just make just a little trough for the seeds to fall in. I'm going to follow the instructions on the back of my packet as far as how to space out the seeds. And also note on the back of the packet, it's going to tell you the days to maturity. In other words, how long it's going to take before I can harvest this plant. When you're planting in the fall, those days are going to change. We are now in decreasing day length. We've passed the summer solstice, so we're losing daylight in the evening and the morning. And so that affects how long it takes your plant to mature. So this lettuce will mature in 60 days if I plant it in spring. If If I plant it in the fall, it's probably closer to 75 days. So I'm figuring that out ahead of time so I know when I want to harvest this. Do I want to harvest this for Thanksgiving? Do I want to harvest this in October for Halloween? Do I want to harvest this in September? I'm counting backwards 75 days to figure out when I should put this in the ground. So I'm opening up the packet, taking out a few seeds, spacing them out as recommended on the seed packet, planting them at the seed depth that's recommended, watering, tapping down the soil, and I'm done. Now with lettuce, you can plant in a nice row like this, and if the plants come up and they're too close together, the nice thing is that then you can come along and you can eat the thinnings. If you're planting something like radishes, which are very common to plant now, you want to plant them according to the spacing on the packet because they're a root and they need the room to spread out. So you want to make sure you're allowing an inch between each seed to allow that radish to grow into the size that you want to harvest. So we planted lettuce, we planted rosemary in here. These are all plants that will do great in the fall. What I could do now and what I do in my garden at home is actually to put some mulch right over this. What this will do is it'll shade it, give it more cooler temperatures so that when it grows, it is protected and it's not stressed out by the summer heat in August. It's going to maintain moisture, and as the mulch breaks down, it will add fertility to the soil for next year. So you're always thinking of next year's garden. Next, we're going to be looking at protecting these mature plants to continue growing through the cool temperatures and the frost. If you have decided to plant for a fall harvest, it is now mid-July and time to get started. I talked a few weeks ago about the benefits of fall gardening in raised beds, and today I want to give you the information on how to go about that. You should have researched what foods to plant now that you want to be eating in early to late fall. The most common choices for planting in July for seeds are beets, carrots, greens, leeks, lettuce, peas, radishes, and scallions, as well as more herbs like basil, dill, and parsley. Also, you can plant seedlings or 3 to 4 week old plants found in nurseries that would include the brassica family like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, and kohlrabi. Then in early August, try seeds such as Asian greens like arugula, mustards, tatsoi, Chinese cabbage, more lettuce, and radishes along with spinach. You can continue planting successive sowings of lettuce, greens, and spinach until early September to stretch out your harvest into the holiday season and maybe do some preserving or freezing. Remember that the day length is decreasing now, so the days to maturity on the seed packet is longer than when you planted them in the spring. So today in the garden we have been talking about how to plant for the fall garden. I've shown you demonstrations on how to do seedlings and seeds, and as they grow they're going to need some protection when we get into the cooler temperatures. When you're getting into late September, into October, you're having cooler temperatures, possible frost, and you need to be protectant of those plants as they're growing. So I have here a demonstration of what row cover and hoops will do for your beds. So growing plants in the fall is much easier than growing them in the springtime. The decreasing day length is making it easier to be out in the garden, reducing your garden labor hours. The pests are starting to wind down and ending their cycle. The weeds are also ending their cycle. But it's a great time for the spring planted plants to come back and really enjoy the cool temperatures. We want to bring them along as far as we can into the holidays, and the hoops and the row cover help give us that protection. So the row cover is just a thin polyester spun fabric. As you can see, light will penetrate through it as well as rain. So what it does is actually moderates the climate underneath the fabric so that the extreme temperatures don't affect your growing plant. Your plants are growing slower now because of the decreasing day length, and so it's going to take longer to bring them to maturity. This allows them to continue growing on a steady basis. It allows them the room and the coverage. So when it gets to be October and you notice that the temperatures during the daytime are getting into just the 50s during the daytime, you might want to think about setting this up. So underneath here are metal hoops. These are number 9 wire. You can get them at hardware stores, you can get them at seed catalogs, and you're going to put them in your garden on each end or each side of your bed, just down 3 or 4 inches to keep them stable. You can also use PVC piping. You can find it in 10-foot lengths, and we use that in the garden as well. That will bring it up higher and give it a little bit more stability. The covers you can find in some hardware stores that offer farm supplies. You can also find them in seed catalogs online. I would suggest that you start researching these things in July so that you have everything you need and you're not scrambling at the last minute. So you're putting them on during the evening when you notice that the temperatures are going to be under 35 degrees. So what happens in the morning when it reaches 55 degrees, you've got to come and take them off in the morning. The reason for that is because it's creating a moderate climate, it's creating more heat in there as well. So during the daytime, the temperature under here can rise as much as 30 degrees. So a 55-degree day temperature under a cover could reach 85 degrees, and that's going to be stressful to your plant. So you need to come on those days when the temperatures are warm and remove them in the daytime so your plants don't cook. Keep them nearby so that when it gets to be sunset and you know there's going to be a frost, you're reapplying them on. So as I said, in October, that's the month when you really start paying attention to the weather. Once the daytime temperatures get to be below 50 and into the 40s, I leave mine on all the time. So to leave them on, what you're going to need to do is just secure them. You can use rocks or you can use stones, bricks, whatever you have handy. Don't go out and buy something. Find something around your house that's heavy and it'll hold it down. The reason for that is you don't want pests getting in there and you don't want wind getting in there. So will this protection take you all the way until wintertime? No, it won't. It's only going to protect you for the cooler temperatures. If you are growing plants and you want them to continue growing into December and January, you're going to need to get some greenhouse plastic. Again, this can be found in hardware stores, this can be found in seed catalogs. And in November, you're going to change out your fabric for plastic and cover that and leave that on, and you will continue to keep a moderate climate underneath, and your plants will not really continue growing a lot. They'll continue growing very slowly, but this will allow you to extend the harvest. So that is what planting a fall garden is all about. You're able to take spring plants, put them in the ground the second time. They're happier, they taste even better because of the cooler temperatures. There's less bugs, less weeds, a lot less garden labor, and that's why it's my favorite thing to do, plant a fall garden. Okay, end of the season garden cleanup is the last component of my best organic practices. This is key to preventing disease and weed problems for next year. So what I'm going to demonstrate is how to remove plants at the end of the season. We're using our weed bed here because it's mid-July and we're nowhere near the end of our garden season, but I wanted to demonstrate the different techniques and why I recommend them. If you have plants at the end of the season, late October, and your garden bed is done, you're not going to be doing any more planting and you decided not to do any fall gardening, you're going to be removing plants that are just an inch or so by just pinching them. And you can see that the root system is very small. It hasn't touched any mature plants nearby, so I haven't harmed it. So this is how I recommend that you weed all through the season. If it's an inch or less, pull it out by just pinching it and then throw this in the garden compost. So just pinch and remove, pinch and remove. And you can see the different types of root systems. There's a tap root system there. This is shallow, but as these plants get bigger, you can just imagine where these roots are going. Well, let's look. So this is a mature weed that wants to go to flower and then to seed. And this is how much room it's taking up. So if I had a squash plant nearby or I had a tomato plant nearby and I decided to weed, I would be, number one, removing all the soil. I would be disrupting the soil microbes that are at work underneath here, and I would be removing all of these roots that are actually food for the soil microbes. So there's 3 reasons not to pull out something this monstrous. Hopefully you won't let it grow to this size either. So you can see I have a big 3 to 4 inch gap in my soil that I would have to replace. So that is why I don't recommend pulling at the end of the garden season. But yes, you do need to remove those weeds at the end of the season. You need to remove garden debris from your plants, whether it's your lettuces or your broccoli, by cutting it at the soil level, like this. I'm removing the stems, I'm removing everything that would photosynthesize and continue growing. I'm allowing the stems now to break down, I'm allowing the roots to break down and feed the soil microbes, keeping the soil much more fertile for next year. So these are my tips on weeding. End of the season is very important to get rid of garden debris. As I've said in some of the earlier videos, garden debris is where pests survive. They will overwinter and then they'll be right there in your garden next year when you put your spring plants in. So this is the last component of Best Organic Gardening. One of the last tips that I have for you for the end of the season is to continue entering into your garden journal. The garden journal you've been keeping all season, you've been writing down information about the seeds that you've planted, how they've been doing, how the harvesting's been going, any problems or disease or pests, and hopefully that's a bountiful information that you'll be looking at through the winter months so that when you go to plan next year's garden, you'll know what worked and what didn't. It's a key to successful gardening. I hope that you've enjoyed the workshops as much as I've enjoyed teaching you. So next time we'll see you in the garden.